All right, so we are recording. If you don't wish to be recorded, please hang up now, remain silent. This is MS Office Hours. Today is October 31st, 2019, and with us, we have Chris Irwin from Foresight IT Solutions, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the Azure Sentinel program. So Chris, if you don't mind, maybe introduce yourself a little better than I did and tell us what you're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, Preston. As Preston mentioned, my name is Chris Irwin. I'm one of the partners here at Foresight IT Solutions. We're Microsoft Gold Partner, doing all sorts of Microsoft-y stuff coast to coast. Prior to coming over to Foresight, I spent 10 plus years at Microsoft and a good chunk of that in the education team. So if I haven't worked with you in this capacity, I may have worked with you or your institution in the past 10 years or so. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Azure Sentinel. I'm going to buzz through this pretty fast because we've only got 25 minutes or so, and I want to make sure we leave some time for Q&A. So we're definitely not going to cover everything in Sentinel, but I will try and give you a good flavor for what's there. I don't want to slide deck you to death either. I'm going to jump around in the slides, and then we'll take a look at the actual product. I'll show you some real-world cases, and we'll go from there. So without further ado, I assume you can see my screen, Preston? Awesome. All right.
Yep.
So everybody's familiar with these next couple of slides, right? We're constantly being added to monitor more stuff. People have IoT devices. You've got, stuff coming in every day, and it's always expanding. It's never contracting. It's difficult from a SOC perspective. There's different products everywhere. You've got all of these, best of breed, whether you're running CrowdStrike or Proofpoint or what have you. You got stuff all over the place. Almost everyone in this room is shorthanded. I haven't run into an IT staff in about 20 years where they've got too many people. So we're always looking for ways to consolidate our services and put automation around it so that we can really expand out and meet the needs. And that's really what we're looking to do with Sentinel. So Sentinel is going to be a cloud-based SIEM and SOAR solution. It's going to provide you with all of the goodness that you would expect from a SIEM, but it's going to be hosted out in the cloud as a service. So what that really means for you is that I don't have to drop a boatload of money. I don't have to, give away kids, sign over your life to get this thing set up. You can scale it out, as fast as needed, and Microsoft deals with all of that stuff. One of the nice things to note here is all your Office 365 data can be ingested and used for free. So even if you're not going to use Sentinel for everything, you've got some other SIEM solution in place, whether that be Splunk or something, I would encourage you to, at a minimum, take a look at it and utilize it for your Office 365 workloads, anything that falls underneath that. It'll give you a good idea of what's in there, plus it's going to give you a lot of integrated features that you may have to pay extra for in other solutions. All of your Microsoft tools are going to integrate directly, and we'll look through the data sources. There's 25 or 30 built-in connectors, as well as some, we'll call them generic, those are going to be things like common event log formats or, logs from Linux that you can aggregate up, Syslogs, etc. So you can really hook in just about anything. And one of the nice things is you've got AI built directly into this. So you're going to have Microsoft Artificial Intelligence as well as machine learning built into the solution. Because it's in the cloud, that's going to be constantly updated, which is really nice because there's always changes to it. Microsoft's ingesting and investing literally billions of dollars in cybersecurity, and they're looking at trillions and trillions of signals across their cloud properties. And as you know, with any machine learning algorithms, the more data you feed it, the smarter it gets, the better detection it gets. So, literally the biggest elephant in the room right now, just simply because of the amount of volume, and we get to tap into that through this solution set. So, without further ado, let's look at this is some of the stuff we covered. No infrastructure. We talked through that today. These slides seem to be a little redundant, so we'll skip over some of this and get to some of the important stuff. It's going to be pre-wired for all of the Microsoft stuff. If you're using Cloud App Security, you've got Windows Defender, Azure ATP. Any of the Microsoft solutions, those connectors are going to be pre-built. I mentioned all of the standard log formats. This is built on top of log analytics. Log analytics has been around for several years now. Microsoft's doing more than 10 petabytes of daily ingestion, so the system can really scale. It's not a joke. That's a lot of log files, and everything built on top of that is configurable. So when we actually get into the system and take a look at it, you can go in and use the pre-built queries. You can go write your own and really delve into what's out there in your data and be able to harvest it. You can bring your own machine learning if you're fairly advanced in this space and you've got your own machine learning, your own threat intelligence platform that you want to take advantage of. That is absolutely integratable. There is also a community built around this, so there's a whole bunch of folks out there constantly updating alerts and different attack vectors, hunting strategies, etc. that you can take advantage of. There's also a free threat intelligence platform that's offered up. So if you go, and I'll show you where this is at. But if you go dig through it and take a look, it's an open source community. I think there's 6,500, 7,000 organizations or so that are feeding data into that platform, and we can leverage that as well to get the latest analytics on threats that are out there. AI, we talked a little bit about this, but there is advanced AI built into this, and I'm not an expert in Python scripting or anything along those lines, but Microsoft has provided a nice pre-built notebook using big data on the back end. If you guys are research institutions, you may have more experience around that. We've done some with it, and there's just a ton of features in there around that. As I mentioned, there is machine learning already built into the system. So the machine learning is going to help us track down threats, events, those type of things, and I'll show you some specific use cases. The most evident AI components are going to be the data aggregation. So we've got thousands and thousands of events happening on a regular basis, even in a small environment. Those events are correlated by the AI and rolled up into incidents. If you've used Defender, ATP, if you've used some of the new threat intelligence stuff in A5, you've seen the attack graph and those type of things. It does a very similar function where it takes those seemingly disjointed events and ties them together, and then can give you a graphical interface so you can easily stream through and see where all the integration points are at. And that's kind of what it looks like. I will show you this in real time. I'm going to warn you ahead of time. Mine is not nearly as cool as this. They've got a pretty big attack stream going on here. This stuff, fortunately for me in my environment, or unfortunately for the purposes of this demo, I don't have anything this complex to show you. But that is what it looks like, and I'll show you a real attack stream, and we can dig through that as well. And then, as Preston mentioned, some of the SOAR capabilities. If you've ever used Flow or any of the subsequent iterations, Power Apps, Logic Apps, etc., it is built on that. It's really, really straightforward to integrate with. I'm going to show you some real-world examples. I actually have one that I built because I got tired of getting alerts for accounts that didn't exist, and so we were able to put a very simple workflow in place to validate that and do something useful with it, and I'll show you that flow as well and how it looks. And then finally, I think you still got a couple more days. Sentinel is completely free until first couple weeks in November, I think, is when they're actually going to start charging. So if you're really, really quick, you might get a couple days freebie out of it. But again, if you do anything with Office 365, you can ingest that data for free, and it won't cost you anything going forward. So I burned through that pretty quick, mainly because I want to actually show it to you, and we've only got about 20 minutes left. If you can see my screen here, this is the Azure Sentinel home screen. First thing you're going to get, as with most of the Microsoft products, is a dashboard. It's going to give me an snapshot or a snapshot view of what's happening in the environment. I'm going to get a graph with my alerts and events over time. It just kind of gives me a feel for what's happening. I can see number of alerts. I can see what type of alerts they are, where they're coming from, etc. Recent events. I'll get malicious activity if I have any, which fortunately I don't, although for demo purposes, it's kind of nice to see a heat map here with some stuff on it. Pretty straightforward though, and I can dig into these and get some information, but I don't usually spend a lot of time here. I really want to get into the environment and see what's going on. As I mentioned, this is built on top of log analytics, and you can see if we open up the log analytics here, anyone that's used log analytics, this will look very, very familiar. You can go in and query this any way you'd like using your typical log analytics queries. There's going to be pre-built ones as well. You can save them off. You can have use Query Explorer up here, etc. But we're not going to spend a lot of time on this because most folks have seen this to some extent.
So what, 30 seconds, what is log analytics, Chris?
Log analytics is a log aggregation platform. So it's a log ingestion location that takes various log data from tons of sources, puts it into a common format, and provides you with a powerful query language to pull information out of it. So, and you'll see when we start looking at data connectors down here, which is where we're going next, I'm pulling data in from 13 different places right now. They're going to be in, even though all of my sources are Microsoft, some of them are on-premise, Active Directory, et cetera. And so they're going to be in different formats. They're going to have different schemas, et cetera. And so Log Analytics is able to ingest that data, put it into a common format, and make it usable to me without having to jump through a bunch of hoops to access it. Right now, 31 out-of-the-box connectors. There's a new one coming soon, and I've got 13 of them. If you go scroll down through here, though, you can see all the big ones are in here: AWS, all of your Azure stuff, Barracuda, Checkpoint, Cisco, big F5, etc. Right? So it makes it really, really easy. If I wanted to hook up a Fortinet, I can come in here and I simply go, connection page. It gives me the prerequisites if I need to do anything special and some very specific instructions to get that connected to my environment. Very straightforward to get this done. Makes it easy to start integrating all those third-party services, all of those, firewalls, et cetera, that you've got in your environment. Other things that we look through here. So I mentioned Syslogs. If you've got Linux-based devices that don't have a pre-built connector in here, you can aggregate those up through Syslog and suck those into Log Analytics so that we can take advantage of them and start utilizing the data that's out there. And we'll take a look. I mentioned the threat intelligence platform real quick. I bring this up because if you come in here and you look at the, where is it at? Here we go. When we look at the documentation, and I'll run this down for you. When you go to the documentation on this, they actually will send you over to these guys, the EMISP open source, and this is the open source threat intelligence platform I was telling you about. Completely free to integrate with. I encourage people to take advantage of it if you don't have one today. There's some really, really cool stuff in here, and really what this is going to do, they've got a giant database of threat indicators, and they're going to feed those common threat indicators back up into your SIEM for you, and Sentinel is able to take advantage of this. And the nice part about this is it's community driven, so you're going to get the benefit of being able to tap into thousands of other customers, having their data analyzed, those threat indicators detected, and then everybody feeds off of it. So it really does help in your intrusion detection environment, and it just makes the system smarter in general. And I'll post this link in the chat as well. Well, I don't see the option to send it in the chat, so I will mail it to Preston, and then Preston can send it out to you if you can't find it. But it is pretty straightforward, and a really cool feature to add in and take advantage of. So after you've pulled your data in, you're going to do something with it. And that's really where the analytics come in. So analytics are going to be the rules and the detection sets that are being utilized. I've got 60 active rules in my environment. Microsoft's provided, I think there's 85 or 90 pre-built rules in here today, and you have the ability to go create your own custom rules. When you scroll down this list, you're going to get notified if I've got a new one in here. So here's incidents based on Defender. We're going to create a rule off of that. Really straightforward. I have the ability to come in and modify just about anything in here. In this particular case, I'm not going to change anything. I'm going to leave it the default for now, and we'll hit create. Because that's pulling it out of one of the integrated apps like Defender, there's really no configurations to that. But if we pick another rule, because that wasn't a great example, but let's go pick a different one here. I don't have all the data sources, and you'll see when you scroll through those, if you're missing data sources, it won't give you the ability to shoot yourself in the foot as many times as you try. And I do try quite regularly. But if you hit
got a Barney Fife image of you, man.
That's right. It happens on occasion. It's going to give you a wizard to set this up, and you can actually go through and tweak the query if you want, right? So if I go, gosh, six is my threshold for 6 failed logins. I know that I'm going to hit that. We've got a bunch of boneheads out here that are constantly forgetting their passwords. I can bump that up. It's really, really easy for me to do that. It gives you the actual query that it's running, and you can see these are very sophisticated. It gives you the ability to go and map various entities in here so that you can take advantage of those. How frequently you want these queries to run. Do you want them to stop, event thresholds, etc. So you get a lot of control over what it's going to detect and alert on. Most people start with the defaults and then work backwards from there. Typically speaking, the defaults are a little noisy. And that's not necessarily a bad thing when we start looking at security. We've just got to tone that down to make it, to tune out the white noise. And I'm going to show you an automated response that we put in place for that. I could come and change the threshold too, but I'll show you why I chose the path that we did. If I had an automated response that I wanted to attach to that, I could do it directly here on creation. And then once it passes all the validations, you hit create, and that'll be deployed in my environment. You'll also notice the various tactic assignments here. This is just like tagging something, right? So it gives me the ability to quickly and easily filter through. If there's a certain tactic that I want to search on or build rules around, it makes it really easy for me to assign that and dig into it. Now, I'm going to come back to the playbooks here. I want to show you everything that happens through these analytics. It generates events or alerts. Those alerts, the AI looks over and does correlation for you automatically and puts those into incidents. So when I get an incident, a single incident may have one alert like this one does, or it may have 10 or 15 alerts associated with it. And so it's going to correlate that up. See, this is 2 events, 1 alert, but it may be multiples. And when you get a massive attack and intrusion detection, there's going to be stuff all over the place, and the AI is going to correlate all of that up into an incident for you. One of the cool things about the incidents is you have the ability to come in and assign this to someone. So you can use this almost as it's not going to be a replacement for ServiceNow by any stretch, but if you've got 2 or 3 folks on your security team that are in here working side by side, having the ability to assign this to someone so that I know who's working on it, and we can go talk to that person, about the particular incidents and the events is kind of interesting. I want to show you the source stuff real quick, and then so if we go and I look at, well, that was not what I meant to do. We want to look at closed events here. You're going to notice that I've got a ton of these failed login events. I was really surprised when I turned this on how many people are trying to brute force me. I don't know who I've upset, but apparently somebody's trying to hack my environment. When I look at these, and we'll go through and do a investigation on one now. What I found when I started looking at this is they're just got the dictionary, right? And they're going down the list, just trying to password spray and brute force my environment. They've got a dictionary of accounts, and they just constantly are going down the list trying to hack in. And I got really tired of just seeing these events, but I didn't want to turn it off because if they're hitting real accounts, this could be completely valid information, right? So what I ended up doing was I created a playbook that actually went and validated the accounts for me. And we'll take a look at that real quick. I've got some examples, although they may be closed out. And we actually have had real accounts show up in here, so I know for a fact it works. It's been really useful. If we look at the workflow, what it essentially does is there's a built-in connector for Sentinel, so when a Sentinel alert is triggered, I can read that information in, and I can break apart various components of that alert. I've got a couple of arrays in here where I'm storing data, but essentially what I do is I loop over all of the users that are in that JSON file that gets sent to me, and then I feed those out, and this is kind of interesting. I could do Azure validation directly in the tool. I don't need to do anything special if I want to see if it's a real Azure account. There are connectors for that. But I wanted to check not only in Azure, but I want to check my on-premise AD as well. And so what I ended up doing was feeding it out to an Azure function. And the Azure function goes and does all of the account validation and then feeds me a response back. So you can get very sophisticated by being able to offload this to a function. I've got serverless code that's sitting there ready to go, and I'm writing it in C#. I can make it do basically anything I want at that point. So it goes out, queries my on-premise AD, queries my Azure AD, does some validation, and then returns back a response to me. And based on that response, whether it's true or false, I do one of two things. And I don't get super specific, but if one of those accounts in that list is valid, I drop into the true response here. I tag it with a valid user and a possible brute force, and I raise it up. I raise the incident level to be a high-level incident so that it bubbles up to the top. I know that it's got valid accounts in it, and I need to actually go put eyes on it and see what's in there, make sure nothing's going on. And for the ones that I get every 10 minutes, when it doesn't find a valid user, it tags it with user not valid, and it closes the incident for me. So I don't have open incidents sitting out there. I can build and it probably took me 10 minutes to build this.
This is fantastic,
really
right? I mean, you just took a whole bunch of things that are false positives that are specific to your environment and built your own automation around it, man.
And it's really, really simple. If you've ever looked at anything with Flow, it's almost the same stuff, right? I can go through, there's a ton of built-in connectors, but there will be instances where there's not a built-in connector, and I have the ability to work around that. I can send it to an Azure function. I could do remediation out of here really, really easy. We've done the fish hunter stuff. I don't know if some of you guys have run into that. And all the remediation is done through Azure Automation, and it's just a webhook. And I could tie into the exact same thing. If I found one and I wanted to reset a password, all I'd have to do is call a webhook, and I could have that password reset both, on-prem in the cloud, wherever it is. So it provides a ton of opportunity to not only, cut down on the white noise, but automate remediation in my environment for those use cases.
And I mean, so that's a big part of it. As I've talked to people about this, Chris, is so we talk about the SIEM part of this, but that SOAR or the operations and automated remediation piece that I think makes it really, really beneficial. But I also think that's the part that's tough for people to be confident in, right? Because when you build automated remediation, you got to know it's going to happen. You don't want to do something that's going to be automated and then cause all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
So I think that's something where when David and I were talking about how do we demo this, and he said, hey, let's just reach out to Foresight and go that route. It's a large part because you guys have much more experience in setting these things up and making sure that when you do build the automated remediations, you know exactly what that result's going to be, right?
It has been the tools make it a lot easier, and you're right. You need to be 100% spot on when you're doing it, but being able to tie into pre-built functions make it easy, right? I didn't have to go and figure out how to get the data out of Sentinel. Microsoft's provided that to me, and all I got to do is read it out and look at the JSON and understand, what are the fields that are available to me. Being able to tie into those dynamic values in logic apps speeds things up. I will say, I'm much more comfortable writing code than I am going through the GUI for a lot of this stuff, right? Having the ability to do that really gives me confidence. I'm super comfortable if I got to write a PowerShell script, and I know how to test that, and I know how to validate it, and so I can still leverage that. If you've got pre-built scripts already, all you've got to do, and if you haven't seen that, it's easy to drop those into Azure Automation. If you haven't looked, Azure Automation is an awesome scripting platform, and it hooks back into your on-prem environment too. All you got to do is put the SIEM client on a couple of machines, and you can create these hybrid workers, and we can execute scripts in your on-premise Active Directory or on-premise environment. So it's not limited to the cloud. It doesn't matter where the infrastructure runs at. And so that's how we achieve a lot of this hybrid remediation. If it needs to happen on premise and I don't have a connector for it, I can write a PowerShell script, and I will bet you dollars to donuts almost everyone on this call has got on-premise scripts already written. We just put them out here and tie them to a webhook, and then they're accessible and usable from anywhere.
And to that end, I haven't looked into it much, but I put a link to the GitHub for Azure Sentinel. I would assume that there is a significant amount of content already out there to help people kind of get started with some of these different types of things.
Yeah, yeah, and it's really been growing. So I was really happy the closer we got to GA. My biggest complaint was that I had to go build all of these alerts and stuff myself, and not knowing where to start from, it was kind of daunting. The community contributed a lot. There was a whole host of pre-built alerts and remediations out in the GitHub community, and that's been jump started into the fully vetted analytics. But they're still out there. There's people constantly adding stuff. We're going to run out of time, but we didn't even dig into the hunting here. If you want to go and actively search for things, there's a bunch of pre-built queries that will do that. But in the community, there are constantly folks going, hey, I'm trying to track down this type of event or what have you, and people are constantly adding in queries that you can take advantage of and utilize in your environment to root out issues. So it's really cool having the community, particularly, if you're trying to get started, you need that jump start, you need a push or a step in the right direction. The community can really provide that. But I will say, Microsoft has pre-built a ton of that stuff for you. And I go to the community on a regular basis, but a lot of times it makes its way into the product and I don't have to do anything special for it.
Well, this was fantastic. Chris, do you have a minute if folks have a question or two for you that you could answer?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know that I can answer them all, but I'll certainly try.
Yeah, guys, come off mute or throw it in the IM window if you want. I'm happy to pass those along.
I have one, Chris. It's Dave.
Oh, God, not Dave. Anybody but him.
All right. Somebody else go first.
Scott Norton, University of Washington. So I don't know if you can offer some advice or perhaps illuminate some of the issues we're facing a little more, which is really impressed with the runbook activity and a bunch of stuff. Hopefully we'll manage to get together some sort of community where we share these things, because otherwise it's probably going to be a whole lot of things I just won't look at and dream that we would one day be able to do and just watch all the people that are heavily resourced able to do it.
Yep.
More things we can't play at. But certainly, hopefully there'll be a community event. So if there's anything we see on that front, I'd love to hear about it. But the other thing we're finding is that, at least initially, we were kind of disappointed in the log coverage on the Office 365 side. So currently it's just Exchange and SharePoint, not all of Exchange.
Not all. What do you mean, not all of Exchange?
So not the admin audit logs and not the new coming out special A5 read events and not the email routing. So we're looking to implement some of those ourselves. And then the other really nasty gotcha we found was that currently these things set up OAuth tokens. The AAD has a 2-year window on these, come hell or high water, for the refresh. And so what happens is there's no way to renew that at the end. And so we've opened up support cases, but right now this product has no way and no warning when you suddenly lose connection. So for our case, we ended up with a couple-week gap. That's a compliance issue for us, but now we have to somehow figure out how to backfill, and the connectors will not backfill. So
that's interesting. I haven't run into that, Scott, but I'd be interested to know if you got a support ticket open when they come to resolution. I can't imagine that there's not going to be a way to auto refresh the tokens.
Yeah, that's kind of what they said to themselves. And part of it is, right, they've gone through a lot of betas of these things, right? So this thing originally, part of this started as OMS way back in the day, and then moved to a solution inside log analytics before they finally said, oh, we really need to make a real thing here, Sentinel.
Yeah, you're not wrong there.
And so I think it's the fact that we're finally at GA, so they weren't necessarily expecting people to be at that 2-year mark.
Yeah.
But some of us were. But that is something to watch for. So we're still looking at strategies to do we have to actually set up 2 of these at different windows to make sure we're not getting gaps, kind of things like that. And I'd definitely be curious to hear going forward what gaps people are finding.
That's interesting because I haven't run into that, but we've been running it since the OMS days as well, and I'll have to look out for that.
Yeah, it's definitely it'll be. It's also interesting. It's attached to whatever account set up the initial OAuth. You don't seem to be able to say, oh, go use this service principal over here.
Okay.
It's tied to a particular identity. So at least now in Azure AD, you can go look at that. You can look at the identity that set it up, see when it is. You can't see the token date. You can see the create date, which you can just count 2 years out. But the other problem there is we didn't run into it this particular time. But of course, if an admin does it, they leave. Then if you delete that identity, your token for this is going to go away and it's going to stop collecting logs. And you'll have to do something else to backfill it.
Well, I wonder if that's, and I'm just taking a swag here, but I wonder if that's because you had it set up using the old OMS connectors, and if the new connector creates a service principal for it.
I did, and I actually had to use a different account than I used before, so I had to go change one of my other accounts to admin roles and set it up. It actually wouldn't let me even reset up, so I did set it. I considered doing it through the log analytics way, which is terribly complicated and painful.
Yes.
And so I did it through the Sentinel. It worked right away and reconnected and caught up on the current data. So we stopped our gap. But now backfilling gap, we're actually having to use audit log search through PowerShell, and then somehow going to have to figure out how to parse that data back into here. But likewise, we're kind of looking at now setting up additional data sources for those other logs for our particular compliance needs.
Okay.
Because, for instance, we had a particular interest in Yammer because of one of the groups we had in it, which unfortunately is not there.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're using this, Scott, and hopefully over time, as you find things that are working well, we'd certainly love to hear about it as well as things that aren't. But hopefully we'll continue to see that community evolve. Hopefully some of the folks in this community will be able to help you out as well as you guys all work together on it. Were there any other questions that folks had for Mr. Irwin while we have him on here? Dave, did you have a comment?
I had one. Well, I always have comments, whether they're relevant or not, I don't know, but in the context of, yeah, right. In the context of kind of our office community here, when do we start thinking about this as part of our security journey, right? We're using A3, using A5, maybe we have cloud app security in place. Kind of where do you see this pulling in, Chris? I've set up Sentinel, learning a lot about it. So I'd love to kind of hear what your thoughts are, and when is the right time really for a customer to start thinking about looking at Sentinel?
I think today, even if you're not going to integrate it with all of the various components, with just the Office 365 stuff, it makes it significantly easier to filter through the just sheer avalanche of logs that are coming out of it, particularly in a large environment. Even if you just use it for that, you can come in and create some very specific alerts. It pulls in all of the MCAS stuff. So if you are using MCAS and you're looking to do some automation or correlation between events there, Sentinel provides a ready-made system to do that and then build your own responses for it. We've got a lot of customers that in their initial just to dip their toe in it, they'll start looking at the Office 365 stuff and kind of kicking the tires on it, see what's there, and you might as well, it's free. You're going to get everything that you would have gotten through the traditional Office 365 stuff. I just think it's a lot more detailed. I mean, you got a lot more capabilities versus just sifting through log files.
All right, great.
Excellent.
Appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, thank you.
Chris.
And Chris, you did a wonderful job, man. I really appreciate you coming on here and going through this.
Anytime.
I'm going to stop the recording at this time. And if people have additional questions, comments, whatever, I'll be sticking around. I don't know about your time frame, but definitely appreciate it, Chris.
Yeah, not a problem, Preston. I appreciate it. I'll hang out for a couple more minutes and try and keep my comments around tenant consolidation to a minimum.
Pre-